This morning I'm going to apply masking fluid to the places that I think it will be useful to have it applied. So the places that I'm thinking about are mostly the brass work on the horse's harness. So there's a brow band right here that's brass with a brass rosette on each end. There are buckles in a variety of places, and there are rings, and there's a fairly large piece of brass on the horse's collar. And the other place that I'm thinking about using masking fluid is on the wooden members that connect the sleigh to the horse. This right here, from about here forward, it's leather, so it's only from here to here that it's lighter in value. So the way I'm making this decision is I want to be able to paint especially the horse's body and neck and face fairly uniformly. I don't want to have to worry about having to cut around small areas, because if I have to do that, then the paint's going to dry in some areas. It's going to be really difficult to get a uniform value on one side of the area that I'm cutting around compared to the other side of the area that I'm cutting around. I think that I can get away with cutting around the leather parts of the harness, and even if I can't, for the most part they're darker in value than the horse itself, so I should be able to paint those fairly easily without masking them. So the first thing I'm going to do, I've got a brush here that I'm using. This is part of my dedicated set of masking brushes. These are decent brushes, but they're less expensive synthetic brushes compared to the genuine sable brushes that I use for the watercolors themselves. The reason that I have these dedicated brushes is that masking fluid is really hard on brushes. So I'm using, for masking fluid, of.a drawing gum, by far my favorite masking fluid. And the reason is, there are a few reasons. One is that it's quite liquid, much more so than most masking fluids. Maybe you can see it splashing around in the bottle there. Another is this particular one is kind of a light blue color, which is different from the white of the paper. Many masking fluids are one flavor of white or another, and it can be difficult to tell where you have mask and where you still need to mask. Those two things make this a superior masking fluid to a lot of the ones that are on the market, in my opinion. Because it's fairly fluid, it's a lot easier to control the edges of your masked areas, and it's easier to get a uniform coat of masking fluid over the areas that you're masking. So that's a distinct advantage compared to many other masking fluids that are out there on the market. Whatever masking fluid you're using, there are a few things that you need to keep in mind when you're using masking fluid, and these are things that I've learned through experience, but mostly I learned them from a book called The Watercolorist Essential Notebook by Gordon MacKenzie. It's an excellent book. I highly recommend it. A few things that he sets as rules for using masking fluid. One is never shake your masking fluid. If you do, you inject air bubbles into the masking fluid. And when you paint the masking fluid onto your paper, each of those air bubbles probably will cease to be a bubble. And when the bubble bursts, it can create a conduit that will, instead of masking the paper, it creates a little pipeline for the paint that you're going to paint over the masking fluid to find its way down to the white of the paper that you're trying to save. So you're better off to stir it rather than shaking it. Another is to always soap your brushes. So I've filled my water container with fresh water this morning in preparation for for starting this painting. So I'm going to dip my brush into the water. I've got a bar of soap here. This is dial soap. It doesn't really matter what soap you use. I'm wetting my brush and then carrying the wet brush directly to the bar of soap and creating a little pool of soap. The tip of my brush is well soaped up. It's fairly well coated with soap, so I'm going to wipe it off, but I'm going to leave the rest of it on the brush. I've got a little container of masking fluid here. These are cosmetic containers that I've bought someplace, dollar store or something. They work quite well for keeping small quantities of masking fluid fairly fresh. But they have to be sealed up well or the masking fluid solidifies. So I went directly into the masking fluid with my soaked brush. The soap doesn't seem to interfere with the ability of the masking fluid to do its job. I'm better off to err on the side of masking a little more than I need to than the other way around, because if I mask more than I need to, then the saved white paper will be a little bigger than the area that I need for the element that I'm saving the white of the paper for. And I can always paint the darker value on either side of the masked area, the element that I've masked off. I can always paint the dark value in to clean up the edge if I need to. It's a lot harder it's a lot easier to go dark than it is to go light. I'd rather save the white of the paper and not need it than to find that I saved less than I actually need. Like with my drawing, I'm working more or less from left to right, again to keep the heel of my hand out of the areas that I've already masked. Okay, I think that covers the areas that need to be masked. There is more brass work in this harness, but I've got the major elements, and you get to a point where you're just creating eye dirt by if you get too fussy with these details. So I think I've got enough on the harness. Let me just take a look at the sleigh itself. I don't think there's anything. Yeah, there's a little cylindrical element right here. Maybe it's a holster for a whip or something. I don't really know what it might be, but it's got some gold colored bands around it. There's also pinstriping, but the pinstriping is just way too fussy. In the scale that this painting is, I don't think that it's going to be possible to do the pinstriping. If I do end up doing the pinstriping, I think I'll probably do it with opaque paint. This the pinstriping is also gold, but I suppose I could come up with something that suggests gold in an opaque paint by using yellow ochre or something and white paint. But regardless, I'm not going to worry about it right now. So there's the the banding on the cylindrical piece. Actually, there is a little bit of brass right here that is superimposed over the driver's dark fur coat. So I should also mask that off. There's really a fussy detail for this masking fluid. It's challenging to paint such a fine line, because even this masking fluid is fairly viscous, much less so than Liquitex or Winsor Newton, but still. Okay, so I have sealed up my masking fluid container as tightly as possible. I'm going to clean my brush. Cleaning your brush immediately after you use the masking fluid is imperative. I usually work from the largest brush that I'm likely to use. A 1/2 inch flat is usually as large as I go. That's it right there. So I'll paint whatever areas I can paint with that, and then wash it off immediately before I go to the next smaller size brush to do the next to do the slightly smaller areas that the 1/2 inch flat brush wouldn't work in. So here I'm doing exactly the same thing I did in the first place, wetting my brush, carrying it directly to the soap, soaping up the bristles, and now I'm gonna rinse my brush off in my water container. And you want to make sure, both in the initial soaping and especially in the cleaning process, make sure you get as close up to the ferrule as you possibly can. If you don't understand what I mean by the ferrule, I'm talking about I'm sure you know this, but we're talking about the silver-colored metal barrel that the bristles of the brush stick out of, and the handles on the other end. The masking fluid tends to collect right where the bristles meet the ferrule, so you want to make sure you get soap up there before you go into the masking fluid, and then when you're cleaning it, you want to do exactly the same thing. Try to work the soap up as far towards the ferrule as you possibly can, and clean out any residue of masking fluid, because over time that masking fluid collects and hardens, and the bristles become just a solid unit. You can possibly see that in my 1/2 inch brush here. You can see that there's a dark area here close to the ferrule. That's all masking fluid that has collected over time and hardened. And in spite of my best efforts to pre-soap and clean immediately after using my masking fluid, it's still, that's more palette knife than brush there. But there's plenty of soft bristles remaining, so I've been using this brush for at least 10 years for masking fluid only, so considering that, it's still quite a usable brush. And it's all down to pre-soaping in the first place. So the soap that you put on the brush in advance of using the masking fluid is a release. It prevents the masking fluid from adhering to the individual bristles. It provides a barrier between the bristle and the masking fluid, and when you clean the brush immediately after, as long as you don't give the masking fluid a chance to dry, the soap that was already on the bristles of the brush liquefies and comes off the bristles of the brush, and it takes the masking fluid with it, in theory anyway. How it works out in practice varies from brush to brush, depends a lot on how long you spend using the masking fluid, and how well you've soaped the brush up in advance, and how quickly you clean the brush, and how good a job you do on that. So there's a whole lot of moving pieces there, but it's a good idea to use good brushes for masking fluid, but you definitely don't want to use your best brushes. Masking is a really important part of the process, and accuracy matters a lot. So good brushes will help you in that, but masking fluid is destructive to brushes, so it's a good idea to have a dedicated set of decent but not terribly expensive brushes to use for the masking fluid. Okay, so now I've completed the masking. There you can see it glinting a little bit. It's definitely reflective more than the paper around it. So it's fairly small passages that I have masked. This is different from the way I often use masking fluid, where I would mask off the whole subject, the whole main subject, so that I could paint the background. Because this is a snow scene, I don't need to worry about that. The main subject is going to be darker than the background. So I'm going to let this dry and pick up where I left off shortly. I'll see you then.